Sluggishness and staggering movements were often seen as the most distinctive traits of zombies throughout the 1960s up until the early 2000s. This imagery is tied to veteran director George A. Romero, the father of classics like Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. However, starting in 2002, the newcomer 28 Days Later set a new standard for the zombie genre. Zombies were now faster, more aggressive, and the infection spread at a terrifyingly rapid pace. This innovation laid the foundation for countless modern post-apocalyptic worlds like World War Z, The Last of Us, Resident Evil, and Train to Busan. These horror films carried chase sequences just as intense as any action movie. More than 2 decades since the first outbreak, the 28 Days franchise has finally returned with its third installment titled 28 Years Later, promising to dominate the box office. The question is, after such a long hiatus, can the franchise built around the number 28 still keep up with modern trends? Looking at the current market, survival-focused films are countless. Zombie films exploring family bonds are also abundant. Settings like schools, hospitals, and prisons have already been done, and even comedic zombie films, or zombies who fall in love, have made it to the screen. So in this oversaturated era where audiences are tired of growling corpses, can director Danny Boyle and screenwriter Alex Garland still find a unique direction? Let's find out in today's video. Set 28 years after the rage virus outbreak, Britain is now quarantined from the rest of humanity. On a northeastern coast lies a secluded community living on the island of Lindisfarne, also known as Holy Island. During the day when the tide is low, residents can walk to the mainland to scavenge resources and hunt. At night when the tide rises, water blocks the path, protecting the island from the infected outside. Everything begins with the family of Jamie, a rugged hunter, his sickly wife, and their 12-year-old son, Spike. At the start of the story, Jamie is preparing to escort Spike on his very first expedition to the mainland. This is part of the community's rite of passage to prove that the boy has come of age and learned how to fight like a man. Leaving the safe zone, what awaits the father and son across the island is violence, danger, and death. Meanwhile, back home, the mother's illness is worsening, forcing Spike to make a risky decision, to seek out a mad doctor named Carson. First, it's impossible to talk about 28 Years Later without mentioning its bizarre visuals. When the first installment released in 2002, many audiences wondered why director Danny Boyle made a film that looked like a student's amateur project. Shot on a Canon XL1 digital camera, 28 Days Later had low resolution, grainy images, random framing, rapid cuts, and contrast levels that strained viewers' eyes. But ironically, this chaos added realism. It felt like a documentary from a post-apocalyptic world. Now, in the third film, Danny Boyle remains consistent with his philosophy. This time, it's shot entirely on iPhone. Even with a $75 million budget, though the visuals are much cleaner, it still retains that raw, gritty look with odd camera angles, dizzying cross-cutting, and chaotic action sequences. Everyone has probably seen that behind-the-scenes photo of 20 iPhones strapped together to film the bullet-time chase scene where zombies hunt Jamie and Spike. Danny Boyle joked that this was the poor man's way of filmmaking. Throughout the film, most effects are presented in a homemade DIY style, so if you feel uncomfortable watching, that's completely understandable. But in return, I think the film has a freshness unlike any other zombie movie on the market. Speaking of zombies, we know these are infected people who bleed from their eyes, vomit blood, and lose control. After 28 years, zombies have evolved into many forms, some even hunt in packs. Especially noteworthy is the introduction of the Alpha strain, individuals enlarged grotesquely by the virus, possessing unmatched strength. Overall, the zombie designs are impressive. Violence is pushed to the max, with blood and gore aplenty. Most shocking are the scenes where an alpha rips out a victim's spine and uses it as a weapon. All in all, if you're a fan of the 28 Days franchise, there's little to complain about in Danny Boyle's simple but effective filmmaking. 28 years after Britain's collapse, his post-apocalyptic world remains chaotic, alluring, and strangely intimate. The action sequences are tense, and the new mutations make the battles against the infected more captivating. However, 28 Years Later has drawn mixed opinions regarding its story. The reason may be that the script doesn't follow the typical mold of a straightforward survival action blockbuster. Personally, I think screenwriter Alex Garland did well, overall. As one of Hollywood's top writers, he knows how to keep audiences from predicting what comes next. At first, we think the story will focus on the father-son relationship between Spike and Jamie as they go hunting together. But by the end of the first act, Spike uncovers a shocking secret about his father, and the entire second act shifts in a new direction. Then, near the conclusion, another major revelation about the infected changes Spike's entire perspective. Spike's coming-of-age journey doesn't follow the usual formula of simply learning how to fight and protect loved ones. Instead, the film boldly delivers deeper messages, giving us a panoramic view of children born and raised in a dark era. This isn't surprising, since if you've seen Ex Machina, Annihilation, or Never Let Me Go, you'll know Alex Garland is skilled at weaving religion and philosophy into his work. He often raises questions about the essence of humanity, life, death, and destruction. 28 years later is no exception. From the setting, the dialogue, to even the masks, everything contains historical references. Lindisfarne, where Spike's community lives, was once the religious heart of the Kingdom of Northumbria in medieval times. It was also where the first Viking invasion of England took place in 793, a massacre that shocked society at the time. Not coincidentally, in the middle of the film we see a group of Danish soldiers, with one of them even joking about becoming a Viking. War allegories are layered throughout. Jamie and Spike use bows and arrows. There are scenes inspired by Laurence Olivier's 1944 film Henry V, and most explicitly, Rudyard Kipling's 1903 poem Boots is recited, describing the soulless marching of British soldiers in African colonies. These are just examples of how Garland connects the war between the uninfected and the infected to countless other wars in history. War has always been part of human history. If you go online, you'll find hundreds of fan discussions dissecting the film's religious and historical symbolism. That's Garland's strength, a writer who demands viewers think deeply. Hunting the infected is no different than massacres in history. So Jamie and the surviving community, are they really any different from the infected? And ultimately, is the timeless story still simply about humans killing humans? Spike constantly witnesses moral values collapsing in a world where compassion is scarce. He's taught that he is a hero, a proud young warrior holding a bow to defend his homeland, like the soldiers of Henry V resisting the French. But the further he goes, the more Spike realizes things aren't that simple. I especially like the scene where Dr. Carson teaches the boy about death. I won't spoil it to preserve your experience, but simply put, it is sorrowful, surprising, and deeply emotional. Dr. Carson, played by Ralph Fiennes, is also my favorite character in the film. In an era where killing is necessary, is there still anyone left who can weep, who can remember the dead? Or has each day of drawing the bow and shooting into someone's artery just become easier and easier? You should experience it yourself in theaters to draw your own conclusions. Personally, I think what Alex Garland wanted to convey is very close to the current state of our world. However, it's precisely this heavy-handed storytelling that creates issues for 28 years later. In some recent works, especially last year's Civil War, I felt Garland went too far into allegory, forgetting that the surface-level story needs consistency first. Strangely, the first act is the most intense part of the film. After that, the pacing slows down, slower and slower, until it completely fizzles in the final act. This isn't just about zombies appearing too little, but also about Spike's challenges becoming increasingly easy. The first act is thrilling, the second feels adventurous, and by the last act it turns into melodrama. There's something loose in the script's structure. Even though we know the film is planned as part of a trilogy, I still felt disappointed that the ending lacked a true climax. When the credits rolled, I half expected another showdown between Spike and the Alpha. In summary, 28 years later is still a quality piece of work. This zombie franchise has always carried a special allure, both in its chaotic filmmaking style and in the layered messages it conveys. For viewers who just want a straightforward zombie shoot-'em-up, the letdown in the final act might be a fatal flaw. And to be fair, this time Danny Boyle and Alex Garland owe the audience one big, spectacular battle. But for fans of the 28 Days Later franchise, or those who enjoy thought-provoking works, this is undoubtedly a perfect choice. And that's our full thoughts on the latest blockbuster released this June. What about you? Are you satisfied with the return of this legendary zombie franchise? Leave a comment below so we can discuss it together. For now, goodbye, and see you again.